Hi, my name is Daniel. I work as an interactive designer at Godot, and I'm here to talk to you about design in the browser. Or, as I would like to call it, how I learned to stop worrying and accept the code. So, we're going to talk about why designing in the browser is really neat today. There's a lot of different reasons to why that is, but before we dive into that, I'm just going to talk a little bit about myself. You already covered a bit of it. I work as an interactive designer at Godot. But before that, I worked as a developer for several years. And that has provided me with a set of skills that are quite handy when you're working with interactive design and especially web design. So what this means is that when I chose to do this, it was quite easy for me to do to go over and stop working with software like Photoshop and start working in the browser instead. So let's look a little bit at what the tools a traditional designer would use today to design for the web. I mean, we use a lot of different tools to convey what we imagine in our heads for the developers. Let's just start from the top. I mean, first off, you have the wireframing tools. And some use Balsamiq for wireframing, some use common paper. That's maybe the easiest. And we use those to just get a sense of the layout and quickly just sketch up what we would like to create with the page. Keep in mind that you could do the wireframing in Photoshop or Sketch as well. Then you would have the design tools, which we use as a designer to convey the design to people around us. And these tools are tools like Photoshop, Sketch. I've even had some friends that used InDesign for it. Could discuss that more. And we use them to create static representations of the designs or the web pages or the apps that we would like to make. To see these designs on the intended device, we use preview tools. So the preview tools are stuff like Silkscreen, Scala, or Sketch Mirror that we can use to put our design from the laptop on maybe a phone or a tablet. So they help us understand how our design is going to behave once we put it in the intended medium. Lastly, we have the prototyping tools. And these are tools like InVision, Flinto, there's several others that helps us work with the interaction of the design. So I mean, we're working in a quite living medium, so we need to add interaction to everything that we do, and we can't do that in tools like Photoshop. So we use prototyping tools to create either simple user flows, like just switching between 5 different page designs, or we use tools where we have to slice up everything we've done, put it into another place, and then animate the things, like in After Effects, for example. Then we have all these new fancy things like site builders. We're not going to talk about those today. They're a bit out of our scope, so let's just keep on going instead. So what we can do, so the problem with this is that what we're doing with all these tools is that we're just emulating the real experience that we're trying to create. We're putting a layer between us and the design. We're creating obstacles instead of just designing directly for what we intend to. So instead of using the tools, why not just not say no to the tools and start working in the browser instead? So, excuse me for the, it's a bit, in browser design is less is more. Because what happens is that if you decide to leave all these tools behind you, so you don't have to worry about thinking about, is this tool the best tool? Is this the newest tool the best tool? Do you have to switch to Sketch? Do you have to work with this prototype program? If you skip all those tools and just decide to focus on coding in the browser, you don't have to worry about all those things. You can just focus on the core of what you're trying to deliver, which is web design. So I'm going to talk to you about what I find being the biggest perks with working in the browser. And for me, one of the absolutely biggest things that I think that I get from doing this is that I get to do one design for all the devices. So instead of doing like we traditionally do when we create one design for an iPhone or for a phone, and we develop that, and then we come to a conclusion and we say, okay, so let's do tablet now. So you do tablet, and then you say, okay, let's do laptop. And then you realize suddenly that, okay, so I wanted to change the color somewhere. So what happens? Okay, so you have to go back or change all the documents, or I mean, if you there, I mean, or it could have, or you have to, or if you want to change some headers, you would have to go back and change all those documents again. So the process becomes extremely tedious just to change the smallest things. So if you would work in the browser, changing just one header would be as simple as just a keystroke. I mean, and it would change on all the devices simultaneously. Also changing the colors could be as easily as just having set global variables in your CSS, and that would also just change. Then you have, and this is also a really not big one, designing for the web on the web. So what we have today is that when we create something in our tools, and when we're putting this layer between us and the final product, we're also hiding from the real result that's gonna come out from the browser or our devices. Because let's face it, I mean, Photoshop can render font and text so many times better than our browser can. I mean, if you would use a really bad type in Photoshop, you wouldn't realize that it was really bad before your developers would put it on the web. They would say, okay, so this is really badly current. It's just falling apart. Or maybe it doesn't render well. So you need to be able to see these problems early so that you don't have to go back later in the process and fix them, because it's really time consuming. But it also helps you discover things in your design or in your design patterns that are faulty. Because if you're gonna sit and create all these static documents and leave it to someone else to finish, they're gonna come back and say, okay, so Daniel, this didn't really work, so what am I gonna do now? And I'm gonna have to rethink my whole design process just to figure out a solution to that problem. Because I didn't realize that, because I couldn't see that problem when I was using static documents. When I'm using a fluid layout, I can always send it to someone and they could try it on their device, and I could easily figure out what could be wrong with it. So this is also quite a big one. Everything is a big one. But design plus interaction. So I mean, we do work with web design or app design, but I mean, it's interactive design. So everything that we do is meant to be interacted with. So using static flat programs to create our designs becomes quite a big problem in that, because we can't create those interactive parts in those programs. We have to go somewhere else to do that, and that creates an obstacle for us. I mean, if I would like to change this, for example, just show someone that, okay, the button is going to change, I would simply just press the button, and the button would change. And this is just 2 rows of code. Instead of having to create something, create 2 different documents, style everything, send it to someone, explain how it works. Everything is just here, easily put. Let's chase it back. See. So, oh no! So let's go here. Yeah. So change comes quickly and easy. So what I like to think, what I like about using in-browser design for my work is that, I mean, I really hate doing things repeatedly. I really hate doing things over and over and over again. And especially if you're working with customers that kind of, you know, they don't really know what they would like, so they always come back to you with small changes. And whenever I have to do these things, it really just bugs me so much that I have to go back to everything and just change the small parts. So by using things like global styles, variables, and template systems, you could easily do all these changes quickly, and also in a way that allows you to be to play around with your design. You can experiment with what you would like to create. So instead of being afraid of having to create all these complicated layouts and then having to change them afterwards and having to spend all of that time on it, you could create a system that would do that programmatically for you, and you could try different ways and different layouts that would give you the best result. And this is the final one. And I mean, we already covered this, but I really believe in this, that if you remove all the tools that you use today as a designer, you would have so much time that you could easily learn coding or design. I mean, yeah, if you're a designer, you would learn coding. But so you could easily learn coding with just like freeing that time and putting it on something else. Because we spend so much time thinking about how to do things in Photoshop, learning Sketch, learning a prototype tool, learning something else, that if you would just say no to all of that and just say, I'm going to learn CSS, JavaScript, and HTML instead, you could do that, and you would, I mean, in quite a short while, I do believe that you could actually learn to do all of these things. So besides these big parts, I'm just going to talk to you about a bit more smaller points that I also want to take away from this. So first off, the handle the big structures thing, we've covered it quite a bit. I mean, the thing is with using template system is that instead of, when you're working with big amounts of data, I mean, you have big amounts of content. You want to change small things. You want to change how the typography flows. You want to change the line height, the margin of the images. You want to change a one-column design to a two-column design. All these things are really easy to handle if you put them in a good framework to work with. If you would do this in, for example, Photoshop or something else, that would become a really nasty task, because you would have to, I mean, okay, I'm going to make this type a bit bigger, I'm going to change the line height, and I need to move all my images, I need to push down this footer, I need to move all of this. So all these things becomes really easy when you have a system in place to handle them. You also get the privilege of taking small steps at a time and then slowly building on what you've done. So you would start with a really easy, simple prototype where you would create basically just the wireframes of what you would like to do. Then you would build upon that, add some colors. You could add typography. You could add interaction. You could add content. And all these things would slowly build up to a final high-fidelity prototype that you could show to your customers and your developers. You could discuss around them. You wouldn't have to have all these steps in between that kind of creates these big gaps and handoffs to someone else. Then, and this is, I mean, I actually have a small little thing. So the thing is that when we as a designer, when we traditionally work with our designs, we've always had the problem of not being able to collaborate with each other easily. So, for example, if you would work with a Photoshop document or an InDesign document, you always have the rule, I mean, there's always only one that can work with that document at the time. And so what happens when you put all the design in the browser is that suddenly you have a code project you could easily put on GitHub, for example, and that would help you, and that you could send to others. You would get, first off, you would get a version history, you could do commits, but you could also invite others to collaborate with you. So, for example, recently I've been working with a project where I went to Copen, and I do that quite often, to find something interesting or something inspiring to put in my design. So I find something that I like and I tweak it a bit, but I don't really have the time to really make it work. So I put it in my design, I show it for the client, and they like it. But then we go into production, and I need that to work better because it's crashing my computer. So I have my project. I go to a developer at Good Old, and I tell him that, okay, so this isn't working. I need this to be better. So could you help me with this? And he says, sure. So I explained for him in about 5 minutes. Okay, I need this to do this, this, and this. And he says, sure. So then he goes to our Bitbucket page. He takes the project, puts it on his computer, and tweaks the things that need to be tweaked. then he shows me the project with the new code and asks me, okay, is this what you would like, Daniel? And I say, it's perfect. So he says, do you want me to push it up to the repository? And I says, yeah. So then he did it, and it was great. So collaboration becomes so easy when you suddenly have this project where you could involve everybody at the company, because design shouldn't really be about one person sitting in somewhere. It shouldn't be about these design meetings. When you have a big code project, you can easily engage everybody at the office with coming with insights, with trying it out, with testing on different platforms, but also helping me out, fixing things for me. Because in an interactive project, you more than often have to work with both JavaScript and other more complex language programming systems that I can't handle. And yeah, so then you just pass it along. I don't know, I think that our developers at Godot may have some different opinions about how easy this is, but I believe that, I mean, if you have a good structure in your project, it becomes much, much easier for you to later implement it in a chosen CMS system. So you have good code, you have good markup, you give them to someone else who can understand what you've done, and then I don't have to sit behind their back and say that this is wrong and this is right, because I'm the one who's done wrong and right, hopefully. And lastly, I mean, it really adds value to the client, because what it does, it really frees up time for us to do these interesting parts of a project where you can really create extra value for someone. You can do these interesting animations. You can try out an interaction flow that really adds value to your project. And they are surprisingly willing to try this way as well, I would have to say. So yeah, I mean I really love in-browser design. I mean it's kind of a result of me feeling that I never have time to do whatever I like. So I ended up just saying, okay, I'll do these things and I can try out these different things, because I believe that it will be a faster process for me to design and experiment and have fun with what I do. So I've had a lot of fun this last half year to create sites in the browser, and I do think, and I hope that my colleagues agree that I think that the result has become better as well. So I mean, the catch is kind of obvious. You need to learn something new, right? So I mean, if you would like to do this, you would have to learn to either code or design, depending on if you're a developer or a designer. It's kind of a big step, but I mean, if you would think about all the other programs that you know today, that's going to become obsolete in half a year, 2 years. I really think that it's worth the investment to learn basically the ground bolt of the web, because you can do basically anything with HTML and CSS and JavaScript. You can build apps, you can create services, you can create presentations. So I really think it's worth the time. And if you would decide to do it, I would say that just remember to learn to code and design. Make it easy for yourself. That means not caring about things like old Internet Explorer browsers. Use fun things like Flexbox Model or SVGs. Easy animating frameworks with JavaScript. And then automate your tasks. So, I mean, I, for example, use Gulp in the bottom of all my projects. And it's basically a tool that helps me automate a lot of things that I do in my design work. So it helps me set up things like browser sync, that helps me do these things. But also use libraries like SAS and autoprefix, it helps me create more efficient CSS code. Then I still use jQuery, it's an old habit of mine, and Velocity for my my JavaScript interaction needs. And I mean, if you have like a bigger project in mind, if you're going to build upon it, I mean, use a good template system as well. I mean, handlebars is nice. We've been using Twig lately because we're using a CMS system that fits well with that. And it really helps you separate all this bloated content from your code. So you would say you could create 4 independent blocks that could help, that you would use everywhere in your design, and then you would just fill them with the content you would choose. Yeah, so I mean, I go out and have some fun, I guess. I don't have anything else to add to this except that I think that you would really, really, really enjoy working in the browser if you just took the time to learn some code. Thank you.